Hello. I'm so excited. Today is our first e-commerce redneck Culturalcast, and today I've got two giants in culture. We've got Tyler Williams from Zappos, who was definitely involved with the culture for a very long time. Incredible human. He also is a great musician. And we've got Robert Alvarez, the CFO and what I call the heart of BigCommerce for so many years. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Good.
For having me.
Thanks, JG. Great intro, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Great music, Tyler. Awesome. I gotta listen to some of your tunes.
Yeah, well,
thank you.
So Tyler's connection to me, I'm connected to both of you guys through, obviously RA through Robert Alvarez through work at BigCommerce, spending 7.5 years of my career with you there. And Tyler, I actually know because we share a very, very close friend named Bo Hodges, who was the singer of the intro song. And that is Tyler, I believe, playing drums, if I'm not wrong on that track, correct?
Yeah, I was a drummer.
And I will tell you a little secret. While Tyler is a great man, a big heart, his beard is actually not red. He bathes in the blood of his enemies, and that's according to Bo. So, but
since I'm speaking to two musicians, you boys would both love to know that my youngest son, he's 15 years old. When my oldest son went to college, he gifted his electric guitar to my youngest son, and this happened like in probably around August, September. And my youngest son's been playing like 2 to 3 hours a night, and he's riffing his own tunes. He's playing like crazy guitar right now.
Yeah.
It's only been like 4 or 5 months, but I'm so proud of him. It's so fun to see
amazing.
how fast he's just.
That's how you get there. That's how you get there, So, RA, I'll start with you. We started at, BigCommerce. It's actually, we've known each other for about 12 years now, I think, 11, 12 years. And
probably longer than that, JG.
Oh, who knows?
Longer than that.
Yeah. It's hard to keep up.
I think we met each other in 2011. So, end of 2011.
And we met. I'd been using BigCommerce on a store, and I actually came to a hiring event where I had the most ridiculous, and I should have really pulled it up for this, but I had the most ridiculous resume you've ever seen. I mean, honestly, it had, it was at the bottom of it. It said genius for hire. I mean, it was cocky as it gets. So.
Well, we definitely were looking for that back then. We had a lot to prove, and we needed people that could do special things. You were definitely one of them.
I appreciate that, brother. And I'd like to kind of kick things off, both of you guys introducing yourself a little bit about your story. And then we can get into the topic of, culture and what that looks like, what that's been in your life. I know good culture, positive culture for me has changed my life. So go ahead, Robert, if you could maybe expound a little bit on your background.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody, I'm Robert Alvarez. Everyone calls me RA. I think I learned most of what, when I think about culture, I learned over the 5 startups that I was involved with. And, you learn a lot of lessons when you go through a startup. You learn, kind of like trust. Trust is really hard to earn, easy to lose. Culture is the same way. It's one of those foundational things that if you don't focus on it, if you're not intentional about it, if you don't have a system in place to protect it and preserve it, you'd lose it. And I learned that through, startups that, had some great outcomes. And the best outcome was the one that I think had the best culture. And,
Hmm.
when I joined BigCommerce, it was after 4 startups, and I had seen what the impact of great culture, could be. And I also saw what happens when don't focus on it and lose sight of it. And, I think from my day one at BigCommerce, I think one of the things that we were all very, very focused on is not losing our soul along the way. I think it became pretty clear that we were going to become a pretty big company, and we were all pretty determined not to lose our soul. And it was something that was very intentional, from the founders, from Brent when he joined as our CEO, and our founders handed off the company to Brent. It's always been one of those very, very strong focus areas and priorities.
Absolutely. I'm there with you. I tell people all the time, early Big C and all the years I spent there were something special. It was revolutionary. It changed my life and so many others. But with that said, Tyler, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where your involvement with culture, and what's going on with you now.
Yeah, so I really didn't know anything or understand what the value of culture was. I was a musician, touring in a heavy metal band, and then found myself in construction and production work, and found myself in Las Vegas. I was just coming off a 2-year tour with a band called Theory of Flight, where we were with Bo Hodges was the lead singer, and kind of heartbroken and lost a little bit because that band I really thought was going to make it, and in ways we did. And my wife was a Monster Energy girl, so she would pass out Monster Energy drinks around town. She had 3 jobs to support her musician husband. And I came across this company called Zappos, and she would deliver Monster to Zappos, and she's like, "Well, why don't you check out this company? It seems really special." And for those of you that don't know about Zappos, it's an online shoe retailer that's really famous for employee happiness and culture. And so I I I got in the door as a call center agent and quickly just found a real home there. The culture was thriving, and the company was all about core values and company culture. They hired and fired for culture, and it was already kind of at its peak of of being known for that, at being famous for that. And I dove right in and I drank the Kool-Aid, and I became a believer of that to my very core. Of That's really what makes a company drive. And so I began to learn everything I could. We moved our company into downtown Las Vegas, which was a blighted area of the city. Our CEO invested $350 million of his own money into the area, created downtown project. So I quickly became involved in helping with the community and philanthropy and investing and developing the city, redeveloping the city, gentrifying the city, good and bad. Learned a lot along the way. And I would say, really, that's where I came out of it, in the end, is that, culture is really, really important, but also, culture can also become something inauthentic. It can become something unhealthy over time if left unchecked. And we had a culture of work till 1 in the morning, get up at 5. You work, you live, you play, you work in downtown Las Vegas, 24/7, 365. No work life separation. It's work life integration. We had all the buzzwords and all the latest and greatest things that you
Yeah.
could talk about. We ran flat organization, holacracy, purpose-driven organization, no hierarchy. In managerial science, we ran some of the most intense and, I'd say, progressive experiments in how we organized and systematized both culture and how the company was structured. And we could spend tons of time talking about all that, but needless to say, I think that what I learned along the way is it's about balance, and it's
Hmm.
about making sure that, from a human being's perspective, that you're not just overdoing one section of your life, and maybe that's your career and that's that's money. But you also need to be paying attention to your heart, your soul, your mind, your body, all of those things that make you a holistic human being. And so, I came away with that with a front row seat into some of the greatest things about culture, and also some of the pitfalls of believing your own hype.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, Tyler's story is way better than mine. That's awesome.
Uh, well,
I actually read a lot about what y'all were doing over there, Tyler, and some of it I was like, wow, that sounds awesome, and some of what I was reading, I was like, wow, that sounds a little scary.
Yeah.
But
I
you
mean,
guys
it's
were
it's
bold.
it
You guys were bold. You guys weren't scared to try new things and pave your own way. So kudos to that.
I think you have to have some boldness to make those types of move because I mean, really, 12 years ago, uh, the whole culture thing wasn't really as mandatory as it is now. It seems, and I think the key thing about BigCommerce that was really cool is it was so ingrained in who we are. And one of the things I wanted to mention, Tyler, we had a thing NRA is we had a thing called Bucket One, Bucket Two. In other words, Bucket One is literally what you can do in a business sense, and Bucket Two is what you can do at who you are as a person. So
we
go ahead.
we had something pretty similar where it was the finding the intersection between what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what drives value. And so we would really look at each individual that came into the company, and we'd say, first of all, we would find what they're passionate about. That's pretty easy to do. And then we're like, okay, if they're passionate about it, are they good at it? So that's the second question. And the third question is like, does the company need it? If they're passionate and good at it and we need it, that's what they should be doing. And we would always drive and move employees towards that. And like through a system of like self-organization, a lot of times they would find that pathway themselves too, because we would just make it available. But that was that reminds me of those buckets of who you are as an individual is going to dictate what you're really passionate about, and also
Well,
what you're good at.
I was employee 44, I think it was at BigCommerce. I always say that founding team of the first 10, 20 people is so critical. What I learned, it's actually the first 100, first 200 people of a company. It's super critical. And I remember we wouldn't hire a manager of people unless I interviewed them. Like I said, hey, I want to make sure that I interview. If you're managing people, I want to interview you. And I remember we were growing pretty fast. We were scaling up. I think we were probably getting to like 100, 150, maybe 200 people. And Eddie, our founder, he's in Australia. So, our one-on-ones would be at night, and we were looking at like performance data and promotion data. And he, to his credit, he just gave me a big compliment. He's like, hey, RA, like the people that you're hiring are, they're our top performers. They're doing great. They're getting promoted. He goes, but I'm not, I'm not seeing that in the other parts of the organization. Because at this time we were spreading out. We were not just in Sydney and Austin anymore. We opened up an office in SF, and we were growing. And he was like, what are you doing? Like, how are you finding these people? And I said, well, you gotta interview for bucket one and bucket two, and I explained to him bucket one's their resume, it's their LinkedIn profile, but bucket two, man, that's who they are. That's their story. That's the stuff that's wired in. Those are the intangibles that you can't teach. And kind of walked him through like some of the questions that I would ask and talk to him about responses and red flags that I look for, and people that came across as very selfless, very team oriented, very much mission driven, purpose driven. Those things can come out in an interview. And I kind of walked him through that, and he said, "Oh, holy shit, man! Like RA, forget everything we were just talking about. Clear your plate I want you to roll out bucket 1, bucket 2 to the entire company starting tomorrow. And I give him a ton of credit for that, because that all happened from a one-on-one conversation that we were having about performance reviews and promotions.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the funniest thing at BigCommerce, the biggest insult is that you don't have bucket 2. If somebody says you don't have bucket 2, that's a huge insult.
Tyler mentioned, got to hire for it, but importantly, you also have to performance manage and sometimes fire for it. And when bucket 2 became a real thing is when we made an offer to a very senior executive, and on paper, I mean, this guy was a stud. I mean, this guy was just off the charts on paper. LinkedIn resume was amazing. He came in, and I think his first week, I had every person in his department come to me and set up, hey, I need to set up a one-on-one. Hey, I need to set up a one-on-one. We have a bucket 2 issue. This is what this guy did. This is what this guy said. And keep in mind, when we had an all hands meetings, and JG knows, like when we had an all hands meetings, it was
a party, dude.
It was
like
great. Super rah. I really pumped this guy up. Like I was like super excited about this guy. And then this happened, and I got all this feedback, and I call our founders, and I was like, guys, we got a problem. This is not the right guy. And let me tell you why. And thankfully they said, all right, do what you got to do. And I remember going up again to the following all hands meeting. And it's one of those meetings I'll never forget, because I was so nervous. I was like, shit, I was just hyping this guy up. I was just pumping this guy up, like getting all the company excited. And I remember starting it. I basically told the whole team, hey, this is what happened. This is what I heard. And if we're gonna talk about culture, if we talk about bucket 2, and our actions have to back it up. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to let this guy go. And I was so nervous telling everybody, and I'll never forget, everybody in the room stood up and just started going crazy. Yeah. And I think that's when bucket 2 became real.
There's a lot to be said about honesty. I think that's one of the most important things in culture is honesty with one another. One of the things I brag about at BigCommerce is, I grew up in West Texas. I'm a redneck, so
I was born in the Philippines.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. We come from different places, and one of the most beautiful things was we learn from one another, and when you have good culture, people grow. They're kind to one another. They try. There's effort in that. So, with that said, I
think one of the things I learned when all that happened was just the power of being vulnerable. I mean, you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna screw up, and you have, even if you have good intentions. I learned 2 important lessons. I learned your actions have to speak louder than your words.
Right.
So you can't talk about culture and, all the great things about it, and your actions don't back it up. But I also learned, in those types of situations, be vulnerable, be vulnerable. And I think once you do that, you're able to make it more authentic. You're able to make it more personal. And I mean, I'll never forget, everyone after that meeting came up to me, and we were all hugging each other, and we were like, man, thank you so much. I mean, they were actually thanking me. And before that meeting, I'm telling you, I was so nervous about that meeting.
Yeah.
Never forget it.
Tyler.
I think that's like a really powerful lesson in that when you do stick true to your core values, and that was one of the big things at Zappos. We would always measure everything against our 10 core values, and you have to back those up. And when you are willing to do something that's painful, like let somebody that's important to the organization's functions, or you needed some type of leader or some function filled. But as hiring managers, being willing to say, I messed up. I didn't see this. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
see this one got through the gate, and they're toxic. And, but a lot of people get attached to their decisions, and then they begin to defend their decisions. And I think your vulnerability of saying, I don't know if you hired this person directly or you chose them or you brought them into the organization, but it's a lot of courage to say, yeah, I messed up on this one. I didn't see it. This person was not the person I thought they were. And while they're good at the job, they're not good for the culture. So we got to let them go. I've seen both sides of that. And I've seen hiring managers stick by somebody way too long. And we would always say, hire slowly, fire quickly. As soon as you see that this is not a culture fit. And we did some things that were pretty messed up. I mean, looking back at Zappos, like one of the things we would do, we would take somebody out drinking. We would get them nice and loose. We would actually go pick them up from the airport and have them interview with senior leadership, and then ask the shuttle driver, how did they treat you? And if the shuttle driver was like, well, didn't talk to, I tried to, and those were Zappos employees that were the shuttle drivers that were actually interviewing the person. We'd go out to eat, and we would tell the waitress, like, put the wrong dressing on the salad. See how they respond to,
That's great.
to that going
I
on.
love that.
You
I
really
love
just
that.
try to test people, and then they would do 30 days of new hire training. And
Uh-huh.
if we started, and the thing is, a hiring manager is like, I need this developer, or I need this senior leader inside of the organization. But you know who called the shot of whether or not they got fired? 30 days of training, and the new hire trainers were teaching them how to answer customer phone calls. And when you, for 2 weeks, answer customer phone calls under the supervision of somebody that's a trainer, they're going to see you stressed. They're going to see you yelled at. They're going to see you in a position of vulnerability, and they're going to be able to assess, this person is humble, this person is open and honest, they're family oriented, or whatever the values are of the organization. You can stress test those things, but we would always say the same thing after an interview. And whether it was healthy or not, we would always ask this: would we want to go have a drink with this person? Is this somebody that we want to just hang out with?
Yeah.
Regardless, as if they can do a function. So we wanted to be able to hang out with that person and spend a lot of time selfishly. And we would admit that selfishly, we want people in the organization that we connect with, that we like, that we think add diversity of thought. Hey, is this person challenging me in the way that they think about things? Like, I don't think about that. That's interesting. So we would test ourselves on whether somebody was somebody we want to hang out with and have a conversation with.
Absolutely. I think it's funny because I moved here, over a decade ago, and still to this day, even though I haven't worked at BigCommerce in years, all my friends are the guys from BigCommerce that I worked with. Some of those guys are family. Some of those guys, when their electricity goes out, they're going to come over to my house, or I'm going to go over to their house. They're family. And so when you look at it like, these types of companies did, you're hiring some of your future very close friends sometimes, and it's very much been the case that friendships that started early on at BigCommerce have survived the test of time. And it's partially because of that. It's a respect thing. It's the fact that they were kind to one another, that they expected things from one another. They built trust between one another. And once you build that kind of relationship, it's a great thing. And it really was, for me, a revolutionary thing. I can't tell you how many times that I've sat in Robert Alvarez's office ready to quit, and he's convinced me to do otherwise. And a big part of it had to do with, impacting that culture and being a part of the vision and be a part of the good part of the company, as we move forward to help build it and bring more good people in and get them in the right mindset. So, with that said, like, Tyler, what were some of the crazy things you did? I mean, that was pretty crazy. The changing the dressing and asking the bus driver and stuff. But what are some of the other crazy things that maybe the most ridiculous thing that y'all did? We had some pretty crazy events too. So Robert, after he's done, if you would answer that as well.
Oh, I mean, crazy is such a subjective term. I think one of the crazy things we did is a lot of the leadership team went to Burning Man. We would go to Burning Man. We would explore. We would see what the fringes of creativity and art and all these things were. Try to bring as much of that as we could back to Zappos. And I remember one time we came back and we planned an end of the world holiday party where we created this narrative that the world was ending. And as Zapponians, you could choose to be in 3 different cults, which was one that wanted to burn everything down, one that wanted to preserve everything, and one that just wanted to have a great time and drink and party till everything was over. And we had news stories, and we took over this warehouse that was actually a like zombie apocalypse like paintball area with a full like um almost like a village or like a neighborhood in it. And so we picked everybody up in military vehicles. We blindfolded them. We took them to the warehouse. They each had separate entrances. So the ones that wanted to burn everything down, we had things that they could break and smash, and they could raid different
fun.
stores and get their snacks. And we had fires, and we had the DJ, and it was like something out of a movie. We just created this end of the world. We had newscasts that were all like on the walls that were saying like that countdown to when the comet was going to hit. And it was just, as wild as a party you could ever imagine. And one of my goals as a Fungineer on that team was our employees, some of whom, were $200,000+ a year programmers, developers, and we had some people that were in the call center making $20 an hour. So we had, a lot of these people didn't have the opportunity to go spend a really awesome night in Vegas at the club or have access to some of these amazing parties. So I always wanted people to feel like they were shown an incredible, very unique time and we would spare no expense to give them that memory, because maybe that's not something that they would ever get access to. And so that was a crazy one. I think outside of crazy, one of the most meaningful programs we ran that I think was just it was already happening when I came into the company is what we called our employee bonuses. We gave every employee $50 a month to give to any employee that wowed them. And so they had to write a little thing like, hey, Jeremy really went above and beyond in this area, and I want to give him my $50 bonus. And so we would look and compile those and see who's getting a lot of bonuses, who has got this like customer service heart inside the organization and doing really good. And we would recognize them at all hands, you buy them something off of their wish list, or, we had this kind of internal mechanisms that gave us a lot of feedback and information on like who the people that were really helpful and over the top kind. And so that was, I think one of the best programs we did was our bonus program. And we ended up taking it to where you could split it. So you could do two $25 bonuses or one $50 bonus. And we just put that in the hands of the employees and said, who's doing good things. So that's not crazy, but that was, we spent a lot of money on the program. It was expensive, but I thought that was a really, one of the most authentic and just pure ways of gauging who's doing well, and then who's giving a lot of bonuses. Who are these kind people that are out there every month giving their bonus,
That's
well,
pretty awesome.
I thought BigCommerce had some legendary holiday parties, but you guys win. Zappos wins on that.
The truth is,
parties that anyway, ours were pretty legendary. The one I remember the most is I think I grabbed a mic and just started rapping in front of everybody. And then one I don't think I got home until like 5:30 in the morning because everybody had these after parties, and I was like, yeah, I'll go. And it was just awesome. But in terms of like the recognition piece, Tyler, I think for us, we used a tool called Bonusly, and we tied it to our kind of core values, and everyone could give bonusly points that then they can, turn into gift cards and buy stuff with. But I think early on, before we had that, every week we would definitely try to recognize and celebrate folks that exemplified the values that we talked about. And I remember listening to a COO of another company, and I think she put it best. She's like, "Hey, if you want to preserve culture, you have to make sure you celebrate your heroes along the way." And the way you celebrate your heroes is you acknowledge them, you recognize them, but you also say why they're being recognized, and you talk about their behaviors, you talk about the values, and make it a big deal, and say, "God, that is just amazing." And it's so infectious. It's so infectious, when you just recognize that type of just selflessness, the behaviors that, whether they're giving, whether they're earning all that recognition. And it's just celebrating the heroes is something that, if we're talking about culture, I would tell any company, put a system in place to celebrate your heroes.
Absolutely. I think I saw a lot of that, and you always knew like who was really getting stuff done, and that was because everybody always gave credit where credit was due. And we had another saying, "Be ambitious." That was part of our one of our core values was being ambitious, and ambitious just meaning that you're ambitious, but you're also humble. And humility goes a long ways. You'll never meet a more humble man than Robert Alvarez. And when some of these things, when he's saying, "Oh, you beat us" and stuff, we had some pretty epic parties too. And Robert was really usually right in the dead center of it, and it was amazing. And we all loved him and really had a good time at those parties. But Tyler, I'd really like to hear from you too on, what is it that you would say to somebody that is in a startup? Maybe they're a young software company and they're just getting started. How do you really, what would you be doing and looking into if you were interested in creating a really healthy culture around your company?
So I think one of the things we found along the journey that was really a very, very deep insight that we never actually got to show the world. So I think Zappos was one of the companies that really popularized culture, popularized. I remember I would go to our HR conferences, and people would come up to me and say, "Oh, you're from Zappos. You ruined it for everybody. Now employees want this and they want that." And I felt a sense of pride because Zappos had really popularized certain things. But we read this book, and it was called Triumph of the City by Edward Glazer. So a bunch of the leadership, Tony read it. Our CEO Tony Shea had read the book, and one of the ways he would lead, because he was you would talk about a humble person that didn't speak much. He would say, "Hey, I read this book. Please read it. If I'll buy it for you if you want to read it." And so we read this book, Triumph of the City, and there was this interesting statistic that popped out to all of us, which was every time the size of a company doubles, innovation, creativity, and productivity decreases by 15%.
Wow.
Every time the size of a city doubles, the exact opposite happens. So something about the way companies are organized versus the way cities were organized, we're doing this opposite effect, is that the more people you pile in and you get more density and more diversity of thought, one is suffering from it and one is benefiting from it. So this insight, it was like, well, so we started studying cities and we started studying companies, and we came up with what we thought was the culprit, which is hierarchy. And a lot of the news got our experiment with holacracy or self-organization completely wrong, because they're sensationalizing it. They're like, Zappos gets rid of all managers. It's complete chaos. And that's not actually true.
Yeah.
But what happened was we found, and they said that we hated hierarchy, which actually we were looking in nature. small hierarchies are extremely effective. Healthy hierarchy. I mean, look at a wolf
Right.
pack, one of the best,
Right.
examples of an effective hierarchy you could imagine. And so, two pizza cross-functional teams inside of organizations are extremely effective. What we were saying is that hierarchy doesn't scale. And
Right.
so, if a young founder and entrepreneur, the one thing I would say is look at a different model other than a top-down hierarchy model and try to find a system. And what we came up with was basically trying to organize Zappos like a city instead of a top-down hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that meant that there was, a mayor, and there's governance, and there's maybe a council, and there's banks that give loans to people, and there's different types of businesses, creative services, and lawyers, and
Mm-hmm.
all these types of people that exist, all these functions that exist within the company that do business with each other. And we broke down the company into micro enterprises, but the one rule was, what is a city? Is it's shared values, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
shared culture. You police against certain behaviors, you expel because of certain behaviors, you incarcerate because of certain behaviors. In certain states, you kill because of certain behaviors. But we have a process inside of the way we govern ourselves. And so, one of the things we thought that was funny about companies is the default for every company is death. And
Yeah.
why? Or acquisition, right? Which you
Right.
could say is the same thing. And so the game becomes, you get too big to where you get too slow, you get too regulated, and then all of a sudden you have to acquire so that you don't. I don't know why my camera is doing that. And then I'm getting distracted because my camera's zooming in. It's one of these like automatic ones. But anyway, we figured out that what we needed to do is figure out how to organize Zappos like a city instead of like a company, and stand the test of time. So, to a young founder, Robert said the perfect number. After 100 employees, how can you scale hierarchy above that? How can you funnel decisions up to a certain individual? Once you get to I remember when I got my first $1 million budget, I didn't know how do I, manage that or understand how to spend that appropriately. Okay, well, I'm going to chunk it up and I'm going to divvy it up. I'm going to do these things, but we have these systems in play that we only know how. And I would encourage founders to do more of a self-organized, how to keep your organization more like a startup, because startups are self-organized in a lot of ways. They're
Right.
built on higher purpose. You're trying to solve something. How do you keep that higher purpose in play all the time? And how do you function to where, instead of just this massive hierarchy that starts to become this monolithic thing that you no longer control, how do you keep that complex adaptive system vibing and thriving in a very healthy ecosystem?
Absolutely.
Harder said than done, and I realized that was a lot of bleh, but
No, it was good. It was good, man.
I think you have to think of systemically how you scale, because at the beginning they're usually highly effective. And then as soon as all the administration tacks on, all the red tape, all the bureaucracy, it just slows them. And what happens with founders is they get bored. Why? I hate in the startup community that the goal is an exit. The goal is an exit? Wait, what? What about building a company that stands the test of time, that's here for 100 years, 1,000 years, that provides prosperity for millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people?
Right.
Why isn't that the goal? Instead of, I can't wait to get an exit because all of this bullshit now is now piled onto me. So that's it.
Robert, what would you say to a young startup, somebody just starting out? What would be your advice?
I touched on it probably earlier. I mean,
Yeah.
I think put a system in place,
Right.
And I think you're not going to be able to hire everybody and manage everybody. So put a system in place on what types of people are you looking for. And I remember we came up with 20, 30 questions that we always called our recruiters our first line of defense, not our recruiters I
And
always
we
refer to
had
them as
some
our
good
first line
ones,
of defense. Yeah,
real good
but we
ones.
had questions, and every interview we checked off boxes in terms of like, can they do the job? But there's
Mm-hmm.
also a section that we had to check off based on these questions, and it was our system, And I think companies today, I think it's important to come up with the values you want to live by. I also think it's important to come up with behaviors that you want to celebrate and recognize. So we had values, we had behaviors, but the system we had in place was, how do we make sure that we don't let folks in that are going to kill our culture?
Right.
And
Right.
it's recruiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of pressure, because when you're scaling, that engineering manager needed that developer yesterday.
Yeah.
That applies to every department. Take your time, make sure you go through the system, trust the process, and make sure that whoever you're putting responsible for, being your first line of defense or hiring for the right people. I mean, business is all about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to build a great company without great people. And
Right.
so much around what people read, founders read, is around, all right, well, what do I do with all of these people when I get them? Well,
Right.
it starts with, make sure you get the right people, right? You need a system to make sure that you get the right people in terms of what's important to you. And it's going to be very specific to your company, very specific to you as a founder. But people need to think about that if they really want to build a special place that people want to be a part of.
Awesome. Yeah, and I totally agree. If you build a great base, if you start out strong and you hold on to that culture, and that becomes such an important thing, is to contribute to people's lives as part of what you're doing, it just changes everything. I had never worked for a company like BigCommerce before, and it totally changed so many things in my life and helped me grow. That's one of the biggest things, is I continually grew while I was there, and develop into a stronger e-commerce expert, and it gave me a career. I mean, one of the things you always said, RA, was basically, stay with me, and we'll give you that degree in e-commerce, if you will. And
I said it would be an MBA on steroids.
There we go. Well, Tyler, RA, did y'all have anything else that you wanted to say to the audience before we go?
Just thanks for having me on. It's awesome to meet other people that have built, and contributed to healthy cultures. I've always thought it's kind of ridiculous that work has to suck. We spend a lot of time there, so why don't we all try to make it a great place that you enjoy to the best of our abilities? And it's great to see people that champion that work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, JG. You were always one of those champions for us, and it's funny. When you think about those first 100 people, so many of our first 100 people just became culture champions.
Yeah.
Right.
Bill, Paul, everybody. Yeah.
Sessions, like, I started talking less, and everyone started talking more. And it becomes infectious. So
we drank the Kool-Aid.
It's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. In fact, I used to tell people that, drink the Kool-Aid. It's good. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for jumping on here with me. I appreciate it. I hope to bring a lot more of these type of shows on, Culturalcast. I think it's important in times like this to really dig into the things that matter to mankind, that help people grow. And man, it's so much more important to have friends and people you enjoy at work. I mean, like you said, Tyler, work doesn't have to suck. Why should it suck? And thanks to you guys for doing that at both of your companies, making work suck a little less for each and every one of those employees. So Thank you very much.
One of the things, JG, I should have said is in terms of like advice and whether you're a founder and you're a startup or you're growing, you got to be real with folks.
Right.
People can see through bullshit. People can tell if you're being authentic, if you're being real with them. And it's not just in the good times, it's in the bad times. Be transparent, be vulnerable. But most important, like, keep it real. Like, the more you keep it real with people, the more they're like, okay, regardless if it's good or bad, we can get through it. So
absolutely.
I think founders, executives, oftentimes they think that they have to be a certain person, or they got to do certain things or say certain things. And man, all I learned is just be yourself and be real and keep it real. And no matter what situation you're in, it usually turns out for the best.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate you coming on. I look forward to putting this one out there and sharing both of you with my world. So I will see y'all soon. Thank you for watching the e-commerce Redneck Show. We're so excited to bring this to you, hopefully giving you lots of good information about e-commerce as it relates to you. If you're interested in working with me, simply go to cartconsultant.com and schedule a preliminary call for us to evaluate your needs and see how we can help you. I look forward to doing many more episodes and hopefully being a staple in your LinkedIn and YouTube feed. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Sherman County cutie with a little bit of down home. Lots of